also other, oh, got it, I got it. But also other sectors. So all our research, all our government services and innovations are also dependent on the big technology companies and the developments that they have stepped in. So this interoperable infrastructure and how to set this framework for cooperation between the governments and big tech is also going to be in our agenda. And what can I say? Unfortunately, for the past 1 month, we have been in the middle of a very tragic war in Ukraine, which has further brought these issues on the table. We are all dependent. I would say our lives are dependent on technology. So this has also, I would say, it has already had an impact, at least in the European Union, how we see digitalization. We see all these digital innovations related to data, EID, through, I would say, through the lens of defense and security. So it all has sort of a security label on it, and which means that the people-centered internet has quite a bit of work still to do, and I'm really glad that the network and these great people have gathered to really see how we together could support the continuation actually of open and free and one internet, which is also not that obvious any longer, and to guarantee that this development is humane. So I wouldn't take more space this morning. I apologize for starting with this doomy diagnose, but I am sure that we can make it better looking at also at the people here. And I'm really glad that during my first meeting, I have many colleagues and friends here today whom I have also cooperated, which hopefully makes my first sharing of the session slightly easier. So I'm really glad to see you, and without any more further delay, I would like to give a floor to our first speaker, who will introduce digital citizenship test. So I'm going to be challenged here with the pronunciation, Yuhyun Park, but please correct me, of course. From Digital Intelligence Quotient. So please, the floor is yours, and looking forward.
Thank you. Your pronunciation is perfect. So let me share the slide. Share. Wait a minute. Okay, and then I need to do the presentation mode. Okay. Do you see the slide? Okay, thank you very much. First of all, congratulations to Dr. Nele Leosk to take the leadership in this important meeting. It is amazing to see the more and more female leaders to take the real main stage, and I'd like to congratulate you. And I want to thank Maylin for this wonderful opportunity to share the digital citizenship test that we developed together with the many partners. My purpose of this presentation is to actually seek and advice to all of you and invite collaborations to develop a standardized metrics for digital skills, starting from digital citizenship skills. I don't know whether you have heard DQ. So DQ stands for the digital intelligence. Simply speaking, it is a comprehensive framework to define and categorize the digital skills. So it has a simple structures to define digital skills quite broadly that compose of 8 different areas of digital skills and 3 maturity levels of digital competence. So any types of digital skills that you can think of, from technical ICT skills, coding, advanced AI literacy, to soft human skills like online safety skills can be fit into one of categories within the DQ frameworks. In 2020, it became the IEEE global standard for digital literacy, digital skills, and digital readiness. So within the frameworks that I showed in the previous slide in mine, IEEE and DQ Institute and many collaborators, we work together to define the taxonomy and codifications to create the common language to define the digital skills by aggregating the major digital skills frameworks around the world. So what we achieved together with IEEE is to show the world that digital skills can become a tangible basis for the future readiness of individuals that leads to the individuals and societal well-being and SDG. So given that IEEE standard, now we are working with partners to define and create the standardized metrics to measure the the level of digital skills. So we called it DQ Index, alignment with the IEEE standard. We aim to publish it this year. But what we are trying to achieve is that we would like to monitor the progress, how we work together to close the digital skills gap. So we are defining digital skills, as I showed in the previous slides, in the context of IEEE DQ standard that address this beyond just technical skills. So we look at the following 6 agenda in alignment with the SDG goal. I believe that these are the major issues that whenever we talk about digital skills. So first is digital skills for online safety for children and learning, online participations, work and innovations, digital skill for well-being, and lastly, digital skill for the human female empowerment. Of course, we are developing it through the collaborative R&D. DQ Institute as the aggregator of the frameworks. We work with the various partners across the sector who owns their own digital skills frameworks. So especially in Singapore, we developed the digital well-being indicators with National University of Singapore and US. And also we work with the digital enablement frameworks for e-inclusions with Int'l in collaboration with the government agencies. So we are looking for partners who are working in this field. So please let me know if you're interested in these collaborations. But today I want to actually discuss the most important measurement from my perspective, which is the level of digital citizenship skills, the ability for individuals to use this technology in safe and responsible way. It is the fundamental core digital skills within the DQ frameworks, which we consider the must-have life skills in this digital age. So the reason that we think it is quite important, especially for young children, this is a figure that we published in Nature Human Behavior in 2021. It shows about 60% of 8 to 12 years old children are exposed to at least one cyber risk. Cyberbullying, gaming disorders, fake news, and all other, actually, the cyber threats and others. And also we published the 2020, the Child Online Safety Index that shows the national level of the child online safety across the different stakeholders. And one of the key pillars that we found is quite fundamentally important is level of digital citizenship skill for children, which actually can help children to mitigate the cyber risk. And our research actually found that this high digital citizenship score is critically important, not just for the children's online safety, and also it is basis for the high digital skills in overall. So it is, of course, intuitively, it is positively associated with digital well-being, safety, and security in a national level. So we believe that this is a core success factor for nations when they think about the successful digital transformation. What we have done in Singapore, together with the Singapore Skill Future, we developed the digital citizenship test system. So based on the global data bank that we developed from 2017 in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. So we identified the common instrument that can work best to measure the level of digital citizenship. And we developed this test, digital citizenship test, that can be included in any existing digital skills programs through API. So it has been used in various programs so far, such as the Digital Literacy e-learning in Australia by Ellen and Moline Foundation and Accenture. Also, it was used by the Teacher Digital Citizenship Certification by CIMIO, which is the ministerial bodies, and the Google. And it's been used by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia government to measure the National Digital Citizenship Initiative for all age group. So what we have built here in Singapore is to build this system to link with the global index and global database, so that when this digital citizenship test can be embedded in any digital skill program, and they can measure digital citizenship level of individuals, as well as it can help multi-stakeholders. So it enables to provide the real-time feedback to all stakeholders, from nations to the individuals. So for nations, they'd like to understand, like we showed in the Child Online Safety Index, they can understand their level of digital skills progress, but at the same time, digital skills program can understand their program impact. And also we have provide the dashboard functions to the schools or companies, as well as individuals, to understand their own level of digital citizenship compared to national and global average. So we've been providing this digital citizenship test to our partners who owns the digital skills and literacy programs. But at the same time, we launched the short digital DCT test to celebrate the 2020 Safer Internet Day last month, to raise awareness of importance of the digital citizenship skills. And we aim to model for individuals to understand the characteristic of safe and responsible digital citizens. This is for children, actually. They can understand. Through this test, they will identify what type of digital citizen they can fit into. So it has, our data shows that digital citizenship test can show the different patterns of their skills, usage, and the risk exposures. I won't go into the details. I want to close my presentation. I know the more important presentation is coming along, but I want to emphasize that it is so critical that we are talking about the digital transformation a lot, e-learning, edutech, and so many buzzwords. But it is so critical that children to have the full digital citizenship skills before they become active in social media, digital media, metaverse, e-learning whatsoever. And it is our critical time that we are moving as a global level into the next level of digitized society. So I'd like to actually invite all of you, if you're interested in this work, to work together to equip the young children and young people with digital citizenship skills. And last slide is my contact. I'm very easy to find. I'm at the park@dqinstitute.org. Please feel free to contact me if you're interested. And you can find us from dqinstitute.org or dqindex.org. Thank you. Over to you, Melly and Dr. Nele.
Thank you so much. Before I will say a few words, I forgot to mention that we take all your comments and questions as always in the chat, but Mei-Ling already took care of that little note. But, I wanted to really thank you for this initiative, because we are all thinking of digital skills and we have all understood the importance, but and I think your sort of field is also quite wide. For example, when I look at where I work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then we are all wondering what are these digital skills that diplomats, for example, diplomats, for example, need, and not necessarily we have a good answer. So I'm really glad to see that at least some steps have been taken, and I saw that my good colleague Sarah from GIZ and many others had also ideas for collaboration. So I urge you to get in touch, and I myself might also send you an email later today. We would then move to our next speaker today. I'm really glad to introduce Yousef Torman from Arab States Research and Education Network, and he will give some updates of his work. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you really very much. And let me welcome you as a chair and my colleagues also. Let me start sharing my screen. So you can see, I hope you can see my screen now. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, but I think
we
I
do.
don't need,
Yes, we do.
Need to take it to full mode. Now, again. So here we are. I'll be talking about National Research and Education Networks, current and future roles. My name is Yousef Torman. I'm proud to be in with this, I want to say, distinguished and global working level. So to start with, I will be speaking about NRENs in general, because I represent the Regional Research and Education Network, which is called ASREN. I will go through ASREN maybe in one slide. I'm not able to move my slide. No, yeah, okay. So, NRENs, I think you are I'm not going to take much time on this, but it's a concept that popped up 25 years ago on that we need to have a dedicated networks for research and education rather than to go over the commercial internet for many reasons. It comes at the three levels. The first level is at the national level. We call it NREN, National Research and Education Network, that connects institutions like universities, research centers, sensors, research hospitals, and so on. Then at these NRENs are connected at the regional level to what is so-called Regional Research and Education Network, RNs, like ASREN. And altogether, we form the Global Research and Education Network. In general, there are many drivers for that, for these networks, mainly the technological aspect, which comes as there is a need for computing resources, access to computing resources, especially that now are more offering in terms of computing and more demand. Therefore, it comes like many applications requires like Earth observation, high energy physics, and so on, require a lot of computing, a lot of access to resources, and so on. So technology now facilitates this collaboration, and it brings the research beyond the closed lab or the universities. It's beyond that and all over the world. The social aspect comes that because the research and education community would like to have their own environment. At the same time, for example, you cannot bring all researchers to do research in one campus or one lab and so on. So wherever they are, you can build their own virtual community through the network, through our network, and they can conduct their social activities and so on. At the same time, they will be doing also their commitment to research together through, and we already demonstrated that, and we have created regional and global research communities within one of the projects. Economic, of course, it comes of economic scales, demand aggregators, and so on, and access to common resources. Rather than duplicating investment, we can do one investment for more than one. Because, for example, no university can afford the HPC, but if there is HPC that available somewhere, then it can be shared by others. In general, for the objectives, I think mainly to provide the reliable communication infrastructure, strengthen the partnership between and encourage joint activities, because now the research is no longer, as I said, individual, it's global, and there is a need for partnership. Otherwise, no one can bring like research of tangible result and so on. We need to collaborate. So this is why we are and so on. Cost of research comes also much lower since they can access instruments, they can access data while they are in their lab or in their maybe at home also, because we provide now service virtual private network for researchers when they are at home or even when they are on the beach. We can provide them with secure connectivity to their resources and so on. So this is the map of the world. Actually, that includes where there are NRENs, mature NRENs, or there are NRENs in development. At the same time, it shows the regional networks. Giant is for Europe, Karen for Central Europe, Central and East Europe, ASREN for the Arab region, and Wakren for Western, and so on. Now, mainly, I want to start with the challenges that we are facing as NRENs. First of all, funding. I think this always the funding is always the first concern. Funding is actually it is inadequate, and we are trying actually to find funding through World Bank, through European Commission, and so on, because the national funding is very, very little. Though some countries have investment, but it's in general it's always inadequate, especially that there are ambitions for NRENs to do more, which I will come to in my slides. Again, the policy also doesn't help in terms of it comes in two dimensions, the policy. One of them is related to that they are in a way or another look like they are competing with ISPs. So the country, the government always prefers to give license to support ISPs and telecom providers, because they bring income and they bring tax and bring so a lot of money to the government. Monopoly, I know you know the monopoly in many countries, especially in my region. It's killing the pricing and so on and so on. Government generally, they have many priorities, especially in the development world. So sometimes they don't see NRENs as a priority compared to other priorities like poverty and so on. The high cost of connectivity is also another challenge. These are the main challenges that we are facing towards building our network. So I will just introduce ASREN very quickly because I represent ASREN. ASREN is the Arab State Research and Education Network. Our vision and mission is all around providing good and reliable communication and network infrastructure to the Arab region and connect them with the rest of the world to provide, to enable them to do joint research, joint activities, access to resources, and so on, together with the world. So these are our objectives and missions and vision. Our objectives are also around the same thing. We have three main objectives. The first one is to support the development of NRENs in each Arab country, and we are doing that perfectly. We have now a growing number of NRENs in our region. The other dimension of our work is objective is to establish our own network, our regional network, and we have now proudly main POP in London. We are about to establish another point of presence in Cairo. Another one is already in place in Fujairah in United Arab Emirates, and so on. We are building our network gradually, but slowly, but it's going. Given the challenges in the region, it's going well. The third objective is to provide collaboration tools and applications, capacity building, conferences, and so on. I'm rushing because I have many slides. I want to focus on the rest of slides. Mainly our areas of interventions are only about dedicated research and education networks. We also work on research and education services like educational roaming, which EduRoam, federated access, as I said, EduGain, and so on. We are now working on science cooperation. We are, I think Mary Ellen knows that we are now working on United Nations Science Summit through the United Nations, together with the partners to promote science cooperation to support development of SDGs through our research and so on. We are working on community engagement, more focused now on communities, which I will come to in another slide. Scientific computing, HPC, cloud, and the grids, and so on, and also internet access, security, and governance. So this is why I said I'm proud with my region that it's evolving and we have more NRENs and developing in most of the Arab countries. Still, we have 22 Arab countries. So I think we have 6 that did not start NRENs yet. We are supporting them and guiding them also. ASREN now is recognized all over the world. We are partners. I say we are partnering with the world. It's recognized by many international organizations, especially the European Commission, United League of Arab States, and World Bank and UNESCO, and so on. Now, this is actually the main picture of the global research and education network around the world, and with giant European network is in the heart. And it's really in the heart for many reasons. It's pioneer. It's also supported by the European Commission to connect regional and national research and education network around the world through projects. So this gives giant more power and so on. So we are now partners with the 2 projects, Gilbert Connect 3 and Africa Connect 3, which I will come to later on. Due to the complications of development of NRENs, we created a portal where we try to bring contents and material to support development of NRENs, to make the case. For example, any country wants to establish NREN, then we provide the documents for the beneficiaries in the country to make the case within that country. So what we are trying to promote for the last 2 centuries is making the case for NREN at the political level, at the decision-making level. So I remember creating the case for NREN because now we are changing the story. Now I would come to that also. I invited I invited all NRENs in the world, especially in Africa and the Arab region, to do more observation about the global trends and the priorities. Climate actions are now booming. Healthcare is very important now, and internet governance. All of that requires intervention from NRENs to support these actions and these observations and so on. So from my, I proposed some kind of topics that they can compete and they can have a role in that. If you look, the first one is achieving United Nations SDGs through the science and research and education. It's a story that it's of the interest and the roadmap of the governments, states, United Nations, and so on, that we want to do to achieve the SDGs, and we can, as the research and education network, we can do many activities to support these developments, like promoting and the awareness, bringing forums and exchange knowledge between decision makers and so on, and also the researchers and students, how we all together as a community start achieving SDGs, all with these responsibilities. We want also to promote science as an instrument for developing communities and achieve SDGs. So for this purpose, NRENs can have any kind of intervention. They can be a host for these activities. They can be a convener. They can be an operator, and so on. These on the right are just options that NRENs can do and they can take during for this specific topic. Other topic is open science and open access. And Maylin told me that maybe we can take this in another, because it's very important. We'll take it in another meeting. So, but open science, it's another opportunity for NRENs to intervene. Like they can be a host, they can be convener, on how we can bring UNESCO's recommendations on open science to be into actions. Because we can do now we are doing at ASREN, we are doing a lot of activities to promote open science through access, working with the governments, with the libraries, to start adapting the strategy for developing SDGs, developing open science strategy. Another one is related to open science, is open science platform. If you are aware of the European Commission, they have created a European Open Science Cloud, which is an environment where we can bring all resources, scientific resources, open access data, and material or MOOCs and so on available to the community through one platform, which is Open Science Cloud. And we are at ASREN, we are developing our own platform. We are at the pilot level, but we will have our own open science cloud that is supported by the Africa Connect 3 project. Again, it's not for ASREN only. Any NREN can host the open science platform, can be a convener if it could not host, can be an operator, like what we are doing now at ASREN. We are a host and an convener and an operator, for example. They can be a service provider, secretariat, and so on. The same for science communities now and communities practice. Science communities are no longer, I said, researchers are no longer working alone. They need to collaborate. So they need means to collaborate. They need applications. They need instrument tools, collaboration tools, and so on. That's where NREN also can intervene and can provide services. And we are doing this now with various NRENs and bringing to them the knowledge on how research and education network can help them and so on. Again, NRENs can do any kind of intervention that I've just mentioned. Other issues like internet governance, security, access, and so on. For ASREN, for example, we are a good collaborator with all internet organizations, ICANN, Internet Society, IETF, and so on. And we are promoting. And actually, ASREN is a member of the Arab multi-stakeholder advisory group for Arab Internet Governance Forum, and so on. Now, that's why I'm saying, if you remember, I told you we are trying to make the case for NREN. But now, by taking my recommendations, I think NRENs can take the role and they can reverse the formula that they are making the case. Now, remember, I said making the case for NREN. We started with this store. Now, I think by taking my recommendation, NRENs are making the case. And for this purpose, I was interviewed by the Giant, which is the European Commission, the European Network magazine for research and education infrastructure. And this interview was published last week. I will share it with you so that you can have a look on my recommendation on how NRENs can change and reverse the formula, and they can make their case. This is a project that I just mentioned earlier. It supported us. It's because I told you, we at NRENs, we are trying to find other sources of funding. So we are working with the generous support of the European Commission. One of them is Human Connect 3, and the other one is Africa Connect 3, which is until now is working and supporting us in various dimensions. Mainly, this is the work package. I don't want to go through them, but they are helping us in building the network, getting more engaged with communities, and support development of open science infrastructure and so on. And we are taking this opportunity at Africa Connect 3 to build our own regional harvesting infrastructure as a pilot towards the Arab Open Science Cloud, following the European Open Science Cloud. I think this is on how we can do more science cooperation. I think I'm left with 3 minutes, so I will skip this and let you know that we are very active all over the world. So we have contributed to the COP26 last year, and we have made a panel on the importance of research and education network to support the climate actions, and we are making a paper out of that concept that we will publish soon on how we can collaborate as ASRENs to support Earth observation also and climate actions. ASREN was very active last year in the United Nations General Assembly Science Summit, and we are part of the Internet Governance Forum last year in I think it was Poland. The same for we have been also in Brazil doing some presentation. Some Internet Society, we are very active partner also there. I think they have introduced me to this community, so I would like to thank them because they find me that I have something that I can contribute to the Arab Digital Cooperation Development Forum. Now we are proud that we'll be also having a full day Arab Science Cooperation Summit during the United Nations General Assembly 77 in cooperation with science intelligence in science. And NREN is aware of that, and you are invited. I will share the details when it's finalized with you. This slide, I stole this slide from Maylin. I think she accepts that, because I want to say that there are mutual interest in cooperation. So Maylin will be also contributing, participating in various aspects to the United Nations Science Summit. And she explicitly mentioned that there is a need for cooperation with NRENs. So thank you, and I'm happy to cooperate with you on this also. Finally, I think we are working at the global level. So we are working together with Latin America, Europe, and ASREN to form what is so-called science triangle with focus on climate, but we are taking it beyond the climate and so on. I hope that's exactly 20 minutes. So I hope I managed to finish on time. And I'm sorry if I was rushing. Thank you.
Thank you, Yousef. Not rushing at all. We even have some time left, and I see that there is quite an active discussion in a chat. Some on important partnerships that you need for activity. But perhaps before we give a floor to some of these issues that were raised in the chat, I would like to know perhaps more from a practical side what these different business models are that you are implementing, either to support schools, for example, or other research institutions to get internet, or the research projects that you are carrying out. Do you have some, let's say, overall frameworks for these business models, how you operate, or it depends on a country, or who supports you and how?
Okay, so mainly at the regional level, it's different. There's regional level and national level. At the national level, it depends on the policy of that country. For example, in some countries, NRENs are very restricted with just doing internet and research connectivity, and they don't intervene with other things. And for other countries, NRENs can do more and more, maybe provide service. So the model varies depending on the country and the policy of that country. So as I said, some NRENs are very empowered to do more activities and more effort. At the regional level, our model basically is to support, as I said, in the three objectives that we do. Mainly to the main focus is to provide the international connectivity at the regional level, the regional and international connectivity to all NRENs under our umbrella. Then we take it a step further towards the services. So we want to bring more services on top of that infrastructure. The services started with the collaboration services, mobile services, mobility services like Durome and so on. And now we're going beyond towards, like, as I said, the open science cloud. We provide cloud service to our community, for example, and so on. So this is how it comes. And again, in terms of governance and so on, depends. Each institution has its own governance. For ASREN itself, we are a non-profit company. We are registered actually in Germany, though we are in the Arab region, but we are registered in Germany for many reasons. It's not time to talk about that. We follow the German law in terms of procurement, in terms of shareholder structure, and so on. We are fully compliant with the German law in this regard.
Thank you, Yousef. Does anybody else want to step in and address some of the issues we were also mentioning in the chat?
Okay, I will read the chat and try to respond because I was not prepared.
Yes, it's quite challenging to to follow the chat at the same time. So there is
what I will do, I will write my email and I will receive the email. No, I will read them, but I don't think that I will have. I cannot focus on two things at the same time. So
no. So just to clarify, the idea is that chat will have questions for the speaker, but the speaker doesn't answer them right away, but looks at it afterwards. It just happens that in this case, we allowed extra time for you, Yousef. So that's why we are actually having a Q&A, because we had a little extra time for you.
Sure. I will save the chat, by the way. I will save the chat and try to make some kind of response, and I will share it with you to share it with others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We are now moving to a topic that I would say is gaining ground globally for various reasons. Of course, the digital public good in a way allows to save us hopefully some bugs, but it does become increasingly an issue of security and also economic, I would say, influence. So the new or the renew or reawakening of open source is perhaps something that I would definitely take away from 2021, and I'm really glad to give the floor to Sarah Fischer from GIZ from Germany, whom we have also collaborated closely. So I'm glad to see you, Sarah, here as we have been for 1 year working quite a bit on GovStack initiative that probably we might introduce or talk about during our future sessions. But today we are focusing on digital public goods for health sector. So Sarah, please.
Thank you, Nele. And I would also like to introduce Skye Gilbert, who's presenting the policy brief with me here today. Just a very brief introduction for the ones who don't know me yet. I'm Sarah. I'm working for GIZ, heading our GovStack flagship initiative, which is based in the global program Digital Transformation. And yeah, thank you, Malin, for inviting us, and also to push our joint efforts when it comes to handing in a policy brief and recommendations on how to cooperate in the digital public goods context, and especially in the health context. And with that, I would briefly hand over to Skye, who will, I think, introduce herself, lay out a bit of the challenges that we're discussing in the policy brief, and then we will walk you through it in the next minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Skye Gilbert Yuhyun. I actually just changed my last name, and I am the Executive Director of Digital Square at PATH. Digital Square aims to create a marketplace where digital public goods are matched with health leaders throughout the world who need them for their to support the health outcomes that they're looking to drive towards. And so we see ourselves as connectors for a lot of the cross-sectoral digital public goods work and the health outcomes and kind of the stack that leads up to them. In the invite, I had there was a link to the brief, and so I'm just going to go ahead and re-enclose it in chat. I'm thinking you can look at us, our faces, and then if you want to follow along, you can click through to the brief. But we're basically going to just follow the rough outline. In terms of the challenges, Sarah talked about, there are many challenges to health equity in the world right now. We just chose to focus on a few based on SDG goals and then the current pandemic. So a lot of what we're centering on for G7 is some of the current vaccine distribution challenges and inequitable distribution of COVID vaccines. As one major issue that I think a lot of health leaders are really thinking about right now. Another one is the general reversal of poverty reduction targets and a lot of reversal of targets that had been progressing well, including immunization coverage for non-COVID vaccines. And then a third challenge is that there's more and more attention to how inequitable access to digital technologies can drive towards inequitable health outcomes. And so there was a recent Lancet Financial Times Commission report called Governing Digital Futures that really talked about some of the challenges around inequitable access, and then thinking about how we would need to reframe governance in order to of digital tools and technologies to create a more equitable world, and how you do inclusive governance for digital, and in particular with a health focus. So the lack of that inclusive governance creates challenges there. So the fourth challenge is that there isn't really a lot of, and this ties into the first presentation on digital intelligence, which I was really excited to see, but we don't really have even digital skills in the health workforce. And so we don't necessarily have consistent capabilities across the health system, which means that even if you get digital public goods into a health system, some will be able to leverage it better than others. And we want to make sure that everyone can leverage equally. Dorothy, I see your chat. I will follow up with a link. So those are some of the big challenges we chose to highlight out of many in health. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about some of the proposals.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, because I think as we've seen, especially throughout the pandemic in the last year, digital services are quite vital for governments to keep their systems up and running, also during times of crisis, but of course in every day life. And in the health sector, I think that was depicted quite dramatically. And I'm happy that we gathered some of the core authors from PATH, from DIAL, from ITU, from GIZ, from the WHO to gather proposals how digital public goods in this specific context can make a difference. And what needs to happen for that is firstly, that we also invest more in common and reusable digital public goods, because that is really what makes it special and scalable throughout different sectors, and within sectors as well, right? So it is helpful to actually digitalize more services within the health sector, for example. But I think what is especially exciting about this approach, and also from the GovStack initiative's perspective, is that this can also then lead to scaling within other sectors. So first of all, very important to invest and strengthen investment in those reusable digital components that can be used throughout different sectors. And second, it's to really connect digital public goods and initiatives that are out there. We are aiming to do that already, also with the GovStack initiative, to create a trusted reference platform, a reference model that showcases how digital public goods or building blocks can be used by countries to digitize their government services. But I think there are a lot of very valuable initiatives out there, and it's very important that we create jointly good reference framework and trust within the system. Back to you, Skye.
Great. Other places where we're making recommendations are really complementing the infrastructure investment with some very deliberate people side and policy side interventions. And so as we're putting in those infrastructure, because of the governance issues I highlighted in the problem statement, really trying to think about what we're solving for from a governance and equity perspective. So thinking about what are the policy environment we need to create to have citizens trust the systems, to have equitable access to systems, and what are the structures that enable that? And again, that ties to that report I shared with the Lancet Financial Times. So really tying into the recommendations coming out of that commission. And then the fourth area is really investing in digital skills of the workforce so that they're really able to use these tools once they're in place. So those are a couple of proposals. And then the final part of the document takes kind of the more abstract proposals and moves into some pretty specific implementation recommendations in short, medium, and long term. So Sarah's going to do short term.
Yes, perfect. So short-term implementation is needed in different sections, but what is really recommended is that recommended also to G7 member states is that they should implement and support initiatives that are existing, like OpenHIE, but also GovStack, for example, to connect open source, reusable digital building blocks and test those reference implementations model out there. And of course, for that, also investments are needed and funding is needed to once orchestrate this more overall efforts, but also to bring it into practice in the end. It's also important to, as mentioned earlier, to establish in the short term also protocols, infrastructures, and governance for those interoperable networks to also facilitate privacy and protect data when it is shared across those different systems. And last but not least, it's also in a short term and very important to strengthen and increase human capacity in digital health, for example, and to strengthen that along countries and also invest in the support of global networks and applied leadership programs in that context. Yeah. Back to you, Skye, for the midterm and long-term ones.
Right. So midterm and long-term, there are some really bold calls to really create a very large-scale joint partnership to launch a end-to-end kind of infrastructure and capacity development financing mechanism. This would address your point, Yousef, I think in the chat around how do we ensure equitable digital access, not just, you know, solve for those who already have it. So I think that what we would want to do is have a call that really does an end-to-end solve to make sure that everyone has that access and is able to get what they need. In parallel, there's some pretty significant skill building. You can start small in the short term, but you want to also make sure that you're really equipping communities with the knowledge and skills to be able to leverage these tools as they come online. And then over time, really long term, I think there's aligning, you know, philosophies of digital deployments, and then getting very clear about digital competency sets, which, like I said, that first presentation on digital intelligence, I think, is really good groundwork. A few closing notes on this brief, just for your awareness. This is a draft, so please don't consider it finished and circulate wildly. That also means that your feedback is, if you have ways you think we can improve it, we welcome it. I think we're aiming to finalize it in about 1 week. We know the things we know are, there's two things. One is that there's general, what we want to do is or what we've heard is that for folks that are not deep in health or in this, which maybe some of you, we need to remove some jargon. So I think we're going to be working on that. And then the other thing is my WHO colleagues just let me know that G7 last year, and Nele, this is news for you as well. I think I just got this. There was a big push around health standards. And so I want to go and review those documents and see what might tag to the previous G7 recommendations and how we fold that in here. So those are a couple of things that might be in the pipeline to support this document. Thanks.
Great. I'm going to jump on in just to explain the whole context of what Sarah and Skye spoke about. They both talked about the G7. For the first time, the G7 has embarked on the Think 7 process. This is a process that began, I think, with Canada. The G20, when Canada chaired it, brought in a policy development process so that the policies considered by the G20 wouldn't be only those that that country came up with, but welcomed policy suggestions from around the world. So this Think 20 process has been going on for the G20 for about the last 10, 12 years. For the first time this year, the German G7 decided to adopt the Think process for the German G7 presidency. So that's how Think 7 arose. And because of that, we had the opportunity to propose this policy brief. How this came about really is because we have our network of the digital cooperation and diplomacy allowed us to respond to the call for policy proposals and jumped very quickly and developed, in fact, this health proposal, which brought in the WHO and all Skye's wonderful work, Sarah Fischer inside GIZ, inside the German government, is also part of developing it. So it's a wonderful example of how this network, by our meeting every month, allows us to make the connections, which in fact carry on the style of the internet as it first began, which was fueled by friendship. When we meet every month and we hear each other and we hear amazing things going on, like Yuhyun, digital citizenship, and then Skye saying, "Oh gosh, we need that for health," and then Sid and Viraj saying in India, "Oh wow, this is very helpful." That feedback within this circle can cross-fertilize in a way that is very difficult to do in big formal events. So this just gives me a chance to say why it's important that we listen to each other, but also when opportunities come up, we know each other already, so we can quickly respond. And that's exactly what we did. So with that, back to you, Nele.
Thank you, Mei-Lin, for giving the background, and I could also only agree from my side, especially when we talk about digital public good, because for quite a bit of time, at least governments have thought that digitalization is a rocket science, and have all independently, separately stepped on different developments that actually could have easily been avoided or at least streamlined with something that is already there. And this is the value also of this network, that often we are simply not aware of what is happening in other parts of the world. And we are not even aware that we are actually perhaps not that unique and original in our digital needs than we might think, or at least this has been my understanding when working with different governments, that we have always thought we are so peculiar and so different that we have to always create a wheel for our very special needs, but actually it's not at all that, and several of the developments could easily be avoided by simply sharing what is already there. And this is one of the values also of the digital public good. But we will continue with the topic and have an overview of another initiative. But before we go there, I was just wondering, Sarah and Guy, and I apologize that I forgot to introduce you. Have you, in your work that you have done around in this policy paper, have you already sort of marked or come across actually some of these goods or some of the problems that actually could be solved with that are similar, let's say, across governments and across countries and across organizations that could be shared? I know that you're working also on consent management. For example, we are working on this in GovStack, but perhaps there are some other concrete areas or solutions in healthcare sector that need our shared effort.
I can share from a health perspective, one that has been, I would say, a lightning rod issue that we haven't really tackled head on in the brief has been vaccine certification. There's a lot of really great standards in place, but this is a great example of tech and policy. There's also really major ethical considerations with how a vaccine certification service rolls out. And I'm not sure there is yet, from a governing perspective, a global consensus on how to do that in a humane and equitable way. But that's a really good example of one that there's a lot of international engagement and collaboration on developing the standard and thinking about how one could implement.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you have also something to add?
No, I think that that is a good example, and otherwise we're more working on a theoretical framework level within this policy brief, drawing on examples, but not specific products, so to say, at that stage.
Thank you. So I'm looking forward to the development of this initiative, and I believe we can move on to Kate from Dial that will give an overview of the Digital Public Good Accord and how this, let's say, initiative has developed. It has been sort of in the making for half a year or a bit more. So what are the latest developments? Please, Kate.
And I just wanted to check. I think Alex was before me. Is Alex on, or did you want to?
I think we had a slight change because Alex cannot step in now, but we'll follow you. So if it's okay for you.
Sure, no, it's no problem at all. Just give me 1 second, sorry. Slow computer today, or slow brain. Thanks, everybody. It's really nice to see everyone today. And Nele, I'm so excited to see you as chair. It's wonderful to have you on board and see you in a different capacity. So congratulations on that. And May-Lin, as always, thank you for your leadership in sort of pulling all of this together. This is actually a great time to come pulling on top of what May-Lin was just saying, which is how do the relationships and the networks that we have actually pull together to make something work in a way that no one had previously conceived of. And this principle and idea of, not reinventing everything, not doing everything completely from scratch, but really wondering how we can work together more collaboratively to actually advance things that we know are consistent challenges or problems is just incredibly critical in our time. Quite frankly, there's so much work to do and we cannot possibly all hope to do it alone. So I want to provide this is a very dense slide because I want a number of people to have a chance to sort of read, but I'm going to not talk directly to the slide, but give you kind of a quick overview. A group of donors, as well as thought leaders in this space, including most of you on this call, have over the past year been engaged in essentially really over the past year and a half, begun engaged in thinking about not only how do we advance digital public goods, but what are the financing gaps that we really have in place to make sure that they can actually be advanced. We have all been working to advance digital public goods since about the early 2000s, yet we have seen too few of these really come to scale. And part of that is the way that we have actually structured our financing around them. A group came together early in 2021 and began investigating what would it look like essentially to do a pooled financing investment and how much was that actually going to cost and what was really needed. What we all recognized was that this investment needs, A, were more than any one of them could possibly do on their own, and B, we really needed to take advantage of the political moment that we are in, such as things like the G7 initiative, to really raise this on the radar of leaders of countries, leaders of companies, leaders of organizations to really mobilize an investment in digital public goods that people can stand behind and that will truly benefit all and serve the SDGs. These donor governments want to align around a shared vision, and the beginning of this was announced by Administrator Powers, I should say, at the Summit for Democracy. And recently, in fact, met in conversations with the head of NORAD to essentially also begin talking about it in that way. There is a political moment where we are actually moving heads of state and ministries to begin to align around the digital public goods. DIAL and the Digital Public Goods Alliance are working jointly as the stewards of this effort, which is essentially a political and advocacy this effort to mobilize these like-minded groups to work together. So let's talk, I think most of us know this, but as per the Secretary General's definition, digital public goods offer this potential of digital transformation while protecting the rights of citizens. They're open source software, open data, open AI models, and open standards and content that adhere to privacy and other applicable best practices. And so the focus of this is around that and the digital public infrastructure that most countries need to advance their digital transformation. When looking at this over the course, there's three main areas where we're really looking to build upon this. The first is to strengthen the portfolio of digital public goods and look at the ways that they tie together, such as we are doing with our colleagues from Estonia, the ITU, and the government of Germany around the GovStack initiative. Scale up the TA and capacity assistance and building that is required and help catalyze the implementation that takes place, and looking at cross-cutting advocacy research and demand generation. How much is actually going to be required is a pretty high price tag. We're looking at conservative estimates of up to 270 million per annum needs that is actually going to be required to do this. Reality is we're using much of this money and investing much of this money now, but rarely do we invest in it together. The charter is essentially an effort by these groups to build a global vision that will essentially help represent a commitment to advancing digital public goods so that countries can build this foundational digital public infrastructure. It is composed of three main parts, which we are working on now and beginning announcements about over the coming months. First, this year, we're developing a clear vision statement of the important democratic values, societal impact, and efficiencies of digital public goods. We're setting together common success metrics to measure progress against this vision. And we're looking to mobilize political goods investments. These can be in-kind pledges, both for products, capacity, and implementation efforts. I want to note, I was hoping Alex would go before me because a number of us are also deeply engaged in the Partner to Connect initiative. And so we're working closely with Partner to Connect as well as other pledging initiatives to make sure that all of these pledges sort of are additive to one another and don't compete. They will roll up ultimately to the Summit for Democracy, but also the Summit for the Future that the Secretary General will convene in 2023. So this is intrinsically part of the Global Compact process. There's a number of groups who are already involved. These are a number of the logos who are deeply engaged in this now. This is a collaborative effort, and we are beginning just talking about it now to socialize and begin to attract and bring in many of the groups who are engaged in this forum now. So I look forward to kind of taking your questions, but also want to see if there are any things that people want to add to this.
Thank you, Kate. And I completely agree that there is a good momentum to take digital public goods much higher in the agenda that it has been, and it has been in a way neglected also for quite a bit of time, at least at the political level. So I'm very much looking forward also to our chat here and to discuss actually what could or should be different this time. We have discussed it with Kate. I remember last September in Tallinn and also some others. That so perhaps I would like to kick off by asking this. So after 25 years of a very bumpy road, what do you think will be different or must be different, and how to guarantee that it won't be just on our radar for a few years and then it just again slips off and
yeah, no, thanks for the question. I really appreciate it. I think that there's a couple of key factors that are different about right now that have been in place. First, I think the fact that we sort of a lot call it dial sort of the period from like 2005 to 2016 is sort of investing in all the individual component parts, but we have done much of that through sectors. The pandemic deeply showed us, I think before the pandemic, it was already starting to fray this idea that we could just invest in a sector and that sector would be sufficient in and of itself. You saw both challenges that were taking place at the sectoral level of any of these products scaling, particularly in countries really struggling to kind of scale that infrastructure or manage it after somebody left, such as Dr. Park's sort of presentation earlier showed today of, you need some sort of comprehensive plan, but then the digital skills behind it to really roll those systems out and manage and maintain them. Next, I think you saw countries who were, such as yours, Nele, who were able to deploy their digital infrastructure, or South Korea or Singapore, were far more resilient and able to manage the pandemic than those such as my own that were not able to necessarily sort of pivot things around quite easily because our information structures were not really set up for it. And I think you've seen a recognition that digital transformation is inherently upon all of us. And if we don't work together to actually invest in those, we will not see the infrastructure that we want to see for the next 20, 30 years. We definitely won't be able to serve everyone. So I think what has changed is kind of a recognition of the things we've tried in the past don't really work. We really need a new blueprint and plan to do it. And you see more political recognition to make that happen. I think what's important after that is, do we actually not just take this political momentum, which is what we're working on now, but how do we set up in the future a set of structures that actually enable us to take that, mobilize it, and move it in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. Maylin, hi, I know your hand is also up.
Sorry, yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was just typing my question as well. And it really extends what Dorothy Gordon has earlier said. Where is the global South in this picture? And I wanted to say, we need to have ways to say that people are involved without saying, oh, we have to pay to play, or might makes right. And so it is so important for me that as we talk about digital public goods for the whole world, that there are many ways to contribute, and we need to recognize all of those ways.
1000% agree. And so we have the consultation process. People could have just written this and said, here's the thing, and let's mobilize all the money. And it wouldn't have done anything, and it wouldn't be any different. Instead, what we're doing is we are beginning the consultation process with 50 countries, basically to ensure that their needs are in place. We're bringing on an advisory group that actually is composed of actors from the private sector, the public sector, and heavily from regions and from countries, who will actually be advising and shaping both the charter needs and where the investments need to come from. And so that input will be tied together. So this isn't a just, hey, this is a 1 month process or a 2 month process, but it's a many month process essentially to get us to sort of a shaping of what the collective future needs to look like. Today, it's still a very small group of people, but is expanding rapidly. And this is sort of one of the first public announcements of that to do that. But then the UNDP is actually leading with Digital Public Goods Alliance, a 50 country consultation process that kicks off this month as well.
Thank you. And I see also Dorothy, please, you have also your hand up to support Maylin or somebody else that has been said, please.
Dorothy, can you speak?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sorry, I had muted myself. I had to unmute. Thank you for giving me the floor. As I put in the chat, I'll be happy to work with you using my UNESCO IFAP hat to have a joint event to discuss this kind of policy option with countries from the Global South. But what I find fascinating in your presentation, and if you could please give us a bit more detail. I mean, everything you're doing here is great, but it definitely takes away revenue from some major players. Do you expect them to like this?
Could you say more about that?
Well, I'm just saying that if, say, you have digital public goods which are being supported in this way, and countries are using open technologies more, that means they would be less dependent on major platforms. Or is this assuming that you would still be dependent on major platforms and be paying major platforms, and these would be minor elements of any system?
It's not considered, so, okay, so your specific concern is around the private sector and private sector companies, not major players.
I'm just saying, how does it work?
Wait, I was just looking for like your definition of major players, that was all. Platform companies. So platform companies are also part of this and also engaged in it because many of them actually are providing open source, are providing open source standards, are providing open source platforms, and are providing open source code to countries now. So it is not actually specifying that a country has to use or choose any of these. It is simply saying that much of the digital infrastructure that is in place actually needs to be more heavily invested in than we have done. And instead what we do is invest in sort of individual component by component by component, which is actually fracturing a lot of the overall investment. So we are, talking to companies as well as talking to countries, as well as talking to others to see exactly how they want to help shape this with us. But we see it as a benefit to others and to them as well. It's actually to mobilize more investment, not less.
Thank
And
you.
I want to be clear. Oh, sorry, one other thing I just want to be clear about. Neither DIAL nor the DPGA is taking a financial long-term piece of this. This is not about us. We've been asked to help mobilize the political effort for it. And so it is about actually identifying how we can pool more money to go into the products, the capacity, and the implementation that exists.
Thank you. And thank you, Dorothy, for raising this issue, because it is clear that there are quite many, I would say, myths or perhaps even naiveties around digital public goods also. So I'm also looking forward perhaps in the future to discuss some of these issues, that we wouldn't fall into this same old path, that it will solve all our problems, because definitely it won't. But just a comment around Global South. I think Digital Public Goods Alliance that also Kate referred to is taking, I would say, the focus actually on the Global South. So there is quite a bit of activity which has also been discussed here, and I think they, as a secretariat, also take the obligation to make sure that there is some funding at least for this alliance until 2030. So it is trying to take a bit more of a long-term approach to this. So definitely a good topic to continue. So thank you, Kate and Dorothy and Mei-Lin. And now we have a slight change, as Alex from ITU will join a bit later. We will take Siddharth Shetty from iSPIRT before that. So Sid, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nele, and it's a real pleasure having you chair this group. And thanks again, Mei-Lin, for giving me time this session as well, on the back of what were a lot of questions last time around. What I will do is I'll sort of quickly run through the data empowerment and protection architecture, which is this techno-legal framework we've been working on to give individuals and businesses control over their data. And then we can open it up for any specific questions. Let me just share my screen. So, hey everyone, I am a volunteer with the iSPIRT Foundation, which is a nonprofit technology think tank focused on building out digital public infrastructures in the space of financial and health services, one of which is collectively called the India Stack, which you may have heard of, consisting of Aadhaar, which is a digital identity, sort of a self-sovereign digital identity given to 1 billion Indians, UPI, which is a payments protocol, a multi-party payments protocol that allows many private innovators to build fintech applications on top. Today, as a result of UPI, India does 2.5 times more digital payments than China, which was a previous world leader when it came to payments. And then as this rolled out, as connectivity permeated, it became important to think about control over one's data. And that's really where the data empowerment and protection architecture comes in. So this collection of building blocks or digital public goods is what we refer to by the term the India Stack. And our quest is inverting the usage of data from not just it being used to sell things to the user, which is what we're mostly familiar with, the advertisement-driven business model, sort of data flowing behind the user's back towards one where the users put in the center, they're empowered to access better financial services by eliminating your asymmetry gaps in the market, by bridging trust, health services when it comes to remote healthcare and beyond. And the way we've gone about thinking as well as implementing this framework is really on 3 levels. And this you'll see a common theme throughout a lot of the elements of the India Stack, because we talk about taking a techno-legal approach towards solving these problems. So one is, yes, we do need a set of open technology standards for consent as well as data, but that's not enough. And that needs to work in harmony with the overarching regulatory framework that encodes many of these principles. And at the same time, we had to come up with a new institutional architecture around who manages consent, where is consent collected. Having recently come back from France, what I experienced was every time I did a Google search, I had to click I agree, right? So that's the old form of consent collection, where really before every transaction, you're having to collect consent because there's no low transaction cost way to receive a user's consent later on. And so what we've done is we've shifted the paradigm from consent to collect towards consent to share. And that's really where the consent managers come in, because they sort of have this fiduciary role and the user has a relationship with that consent manager. And they are responsible for creating what is often in many of our regulatory frameworks, the informed consent experience. And so the user can register with any consent manager of their choice. As I just mentioned, it adopts the common technical framework. So therefore, all the places where your data are stored, which is what we call data providers, and in this case, I'm just using an example from the financial space, your data remains with them. You can discover where all your data resides. So data is inherently decentralized in the system. No central store is created at all. The consent manager cannot store your data. Identity is federated. So there's no unique ID that is used. The user is the only one in the system that can create a unified view, but no one else in the system gets a unique access to your longitudinal records. And that's very important from a privacy perspective. I may want to keep different types of data separate, but then aggregated for a particular transaction. So the user can register. There's a market economy of consent managers, discover where their data resides, link their accounts. And once they do that, you have an ID, let's say, Nele at consent manager 1. And now when Nele decides to apply for a loan, in the current world, Nele would have to give her username and password out, right? That's a predominant way we know financial data is shared. Or you have to go and get your PDF statements and then upload that, or upload scan copies. But in this paradigm, all you need to do is just give them your consent ID, which would be, say, Nele at consent manager 1. And in real time on this utility, you get a consent request. And that consent request is shown to you in a multimodal format. For example, some people may have a smartphone and you may have different user experience needs from that. Some people may not have a smartphone, yet they should still be able to give informed consent through an assisted mechanism. So the design of these open protocols allows those multimodal experiences to be created. Once you review that consent, and if you approve it, you may also deny it, but if you approve it, then in real time, your data is fetched, end-to-end encrypted with perfect forward secrecy, and then sent to the entity on the other end. That's basically what's happening. So this framework is now rolling out for financial data in India. Already about 150, 200 million bank accounts are live on this system. So we know it's been a journey of about 5 to 6 years, but the bet we took, which is if we give individuals control, they will be informed enough to take those decisions. We see that playing out. We see giving individuals that agency, actually creating not just a sense of empowerment amongst them, but also opening it up for more innovators on the other end, right? So it's sort of at the intersection of three circles. You have privacy, you have innovation, and you have competition. If you look at it from all three vantage points to really bring this ecosystem to life. What's happened since is this movement of giving data back to people in an informed way, in an empowering way, is now spreading across other parts of the world. And last year, a group was formed of senior policy makers, including Margaret Vestager and other political representatives from many other countries, Norway and Australia and Japan, and then of course India. And this group has been called sort of informally the Data Six. And the real idea was bringing about alignment on this techno-legal approach, because what we realized is most countries across the world actually have the same regulatory framework from a principles perspective, right? It may have different manifestations sectorally and otherwise, but at a first principles level, all have similar views on consent, whether you take America, particularly California, you take Europe, you take Rwanda, you take India, you take Australia, similar views on consent, similar views on data portability, similar views on privacy at a first principles level. And therefore, we felt that there should be an alignment between those principles and open technology standards, because if that doesn't happen, there is a failure to operationalize, which is what we saw with many of such regulations. And so therefore, this group has met and met since then. A working group was also formed, which has met quite a few times. It also consists of a few other bodies, the Digital Public Goods Alliance and the Bank of International Settlements. And what's since happened is there's been now an active effort within France. And for some of you who you may know, France was actually the originator of GDPR, sort of the base regulation that then became GDPR. And therefore, France is quite keen on taking this and piloting it. And so you'll soon see this being manifested first within the French ecosystem, and then as part of the broader European fabric as well. And so that's a summary of the data empowerment and protection architecture. I'll pause here and open it up for questions.
I'll jump in. Sid, I just listening to this and thinking, gosh, this should be a policy brief to the G7. I wonder whether or not we can actually do something, especially since Margaret Vestager is already so involved. This could be something that Germany could actually bring to the G7 on behalf of the EU.
No, absolutely. And I think there are many connects two ways, because this also feeds in parallel into the G20 conversation. India would be hosting the G20 next year as well, which in light of Ukraine is a fairly key G20 that's going to take place in terms of the agenda. But going back to Germany, in fact, in the workshop that you see that's outlined here, a lot of the technical standards that have been set, let's say, in open banking, come out of Germany, particularly Berlin. The Open Banking Berlin group has been driving it for the EU. And so therefore, there is a strong ecosystem where there are existing interconnects. And I think thinking about it in the form of a policy brief as part of the G7 absolutely makes sense. There's a bunch of thinking that's happened within France as well, and in that regard. And so it might make sense to have a follow-on conversation around how that could be orchestrated.
I'll follow up with you offline, and if Sarah Fischer is still here, I would like her to be involved. I've been talking with David Roos at GIZ, and so we could bring together some of these pieces. Thank you, Sid. This is really great stuff.
Thank you, Sid. I also had a thought when listening to you that it's actually pretty much also connected to the conversations and discussions we currently have in the EU, because the data came out now, and one of the recommendations or suggestions that at least come from my government is precisely this, to start also working on some of the data standards to guarantee also the, let's say, the cross-border use of data and data across also different sectors. This is definitely an area that is currently very high in this European politics. It would be also good to see whether some of this work could also be used for these conversations. So I will also get in touch later. So thank you, Sid, very much.
Absolutely. And I think, building on that, it does two things. One is particularly the Data Act supercharges, I think it's Article 7 of GDPR around data portability. And the second element of it is also with the rising consensus around sovereignty, digital sovereignty, because how do nation states exert control up to reasonable levels on technical platforms in the interest of their citizens? This whole conversation around open standards becomes important while not blocking out the market, right? And that balance is another area where we're seeing, particularly for policymakers, this discussion becomes quite key.
I'll just take it. Oh, Govinda has a thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Melin. Sid, thanks for the wonderful work. You know, I could relate to a lot of what you described, but I just wanted to be sure when you were referring to self-sovereign and some of the other terms, is that something which is grounded in decentralized identity and self-sovereign identity?
Yes, so it's a longer...
And the W3 standards around it. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, so it's a longer conversation around that. The principles are very much the same. In fact, we actively used the W3C verifiable credentials, and I think Viraj, if he's still on, has been a part of that DIVOC effort, where hundreds of millions of them, or I think a few billion of them, have been issued as part of the COVID vaccine effort. But there are also a few nuances on how do you operationalize self-sovereign identity at scale, and make it applicable, especially for use cases in the financial space where anti-money laundering, counterterrorism become key. Hence, there's a need for uniqueness, besides other forms of attestations. So it's very much similar, but there are a few other nuances, I would say, to roll it out in particularly regulated sectors beyond the traditional private sector use cases that SSI is currently being discussed in.
Great work. Thank you, my friend.
You had a comment. Did you want to step in?
Yeah, I actually think that I wanted to take advantage of the fact that Matthew Parran from Salesforce is on. He's a private sector player. And do you have any initial thoughts on suggestions, just as a person, not speaking on behalf of your country, how your company, how the private sector can engage with the digital data empowerment?
Well, I think it's really noteworthy that, Sid, you're bringing this up, because I think if you look at what a lot of companies like Salesforce are doing, a lot of platform companies are doing right now to try to make it possible for us to continue to grow our business in Europe and other parts of the world where data protection laws are really, really emerging. You're seeing us really evolve our business model and like our entire go-to-market. So Microsoft has made big strides in this area. Salesforce announced last year our so-called EU operating zone. We are going live in dozens of countries with local infrastructure in order to provide in-country data storage capabilities in a lot of these countries. And we are oftentimes finding complication with how we do identity at the global scale. So we're having to really rethink identity and what it means to protect an individual, given a lot of the complex requirements that are oftentimes grounded in cybersecurity. So the ANSSI cybersecurity organization in France is someone we have an ongoing dialogue with. And they're the ones who are really guiding us in a lot of the decisions we make in the EU, as well as France in particular. And so the questions that I have for this group is the degree to which current platform capability or current platform players are, what are those timelines? What are those expectations for how you can transition from what was largely a 2000s era where you had public cloud capabilities enabling distributed infrastructure around the world that allowed so much economic growth to occur? How does that transition into this new world in a way that makes sense from a market driven perspective and a capitalist perspective? Because I think the public policy point of view is something that we hear a lot, and we have many ongoing conversations in Brussels and Washington and all over the world. But the thing that we really struggle with is understanding where those decisions and where those contours of the conversation will go, so we can make sure that we are positioning our own independent investment choices to meet that end state objective on any given timeline. So I don't know if anyone has conversation points on that or any guidance on that, but that's very much what we are discussing at the highest levels within our organization about where we're going to go with a lot of these markets, especially given these public policy changes. So Sid, maybe you have some thoughts?
Sure, I'll give it a shot, Matthew, and then would be great to hear other people's views. I think this really varies depending on the digital infrastructure you're talking about. I'll give you an example from payments and then tie it back to data. So in payments, when India created the Unified Public Payments Interface, the design of it essentially allowed private innovators to be built on top while keeping money flowing within the regulated system. Now, this is very different from the architecture in the US, where you have zero innovation happening within your central banks, etc. Hence this crypto push, right? And so therefore, the way it works in UPI is you have your largest companies from across the world, which is Facebook through WhatsApp, Paytm, and hence Alibaba on the back end of that. You've got Google Pay, all participating on a common protocol that is run as a public infrastructure, because our view is moving data is next to free, right? Skype has shown that to us, or Zoom has shown that to us to some extent. So why should moving money be taxed at 2%, right? And that's an enormous tax on an economy. So therefore, what we did is we brought in market forces in the right way and leveraged, for example, the consumer experience that they bring to the table to cater to diverse use cases, while still keeping the base public infrastructure interoperable, which is for a long while in the internet world, what came out of IETF, your various protocols facilitated that. But somewhere along the way, we stopped doing that within the internet community, and that got captured through various forms, right? And so therefore, that balance is extremely important. For example, in the data world, Microsoft very actively through Satya and his team have been working on the data empowerment and protection architecture, because you do need private players. So the view is not that you have one government service provider or one private company, but how do you create the right set of protocols that co-ops people at different levels of that transaction chain and really makes it a wide level playing field market and balance the two, the public sector as well as private sector forces. So that's sort of how we've looked at it so far. And therefore, even in data, it is not, while it's rolling out with the banks, none of the banks, for example, have been mandated to participate in it, right? So it is market incentives at play at a certain point. Similarly, in other sectors. So that's just my viewpoint on how we've sort of framed it so far.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment here? You can take a quick comment and then move to Alex, who has managed to join us. But
I just wanted to say that Matthew has given us the topic for a brilliant paper. And I hope that someone here is going to write that. What are the implications of the transition? Just brilliant. I hope we take it up in some way.
It would be read with great interest, Dorothy.
Yes, likewise, perhaps it would also help actually some of these discussions that are currently going on, as Matthew said, at least at the EU table, all these questions. So how are we going to move?
Over to you, write the paper.
Yeah, so looking forward to help also decide us, for example, how we are going to go further with data management, sharing, and also data spaces and so forth. From Estonian government, it seems we are going to go at least towards more, let's say, private sector clouds than we have until now, but that depends on many things, and not only our choices or decisions. But I'm really glad to finally give a floor to our last speaker from ITU to introduce the initiative that many of us have already mentioned here, Partner to Connect. So Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and sorry that I had to drop off for a bit, and happy that I'm back. And I know a few colleagues on the call know about Partner to Connect quite well, so I'm actually going to go through this pretty quick. I'll do it under 10 minutes, actually. So for those that are new to what this Partner to Connect platform is, thank you, Maylin. You've given me the floor and Doreen the floor a few times to give an update. So we started off, of course, with the overall challenge of connecting the 2.9 billion. And we've created, through the ITU and through the UN, frankly, a platform where we want to have a pledging focused on connectivity. So this is unique and new for the UN to have a focus on connectivity. And we think this is exactly what we need to do now. We need to bring together different organizations, work together in partnerships, everybody contributing. I think every single person on this call probably has something they can contribute to this. We spent the last few months creating a intellectual framework. We call it the action framework. So these 4 focus areas, and then within each focus area, you can see that we have these pillars that sort of unpack that focus area further. We have leaders, 5 leaders across each that are sort of coordinating the work of each of these focus areas, external leaders. Kate Wilson is one of our focus area leaders on the value creation focus area as an example. And so this framework was actually released last Wednesday. I should put in the chat the link that you can look at it. It's a very lengthy, comprehensive report, but gives a bit of an intellectual framework behind how we think you need to address if you're going to achieve meaningful connectivity. But really, P2C is ultimately about pledges. So we're creating the framework so that each of you or any organization can think of what they're doing and turn it into the form of a pledge. And by doing that, not only are we achieving the overall objectives that we're all committed to doing, but we also want to have this sort of dynamic of people seeing what other people are pledging, what governments are pledging, and creating a bit of this supply-demand dynamic. And these pledges, of course, we want it to be quantifiable, monitoring, and we will help monitor and track this over time. So I've shown this before, that there are 4 kinds of pledges: a financial pledge, which is making a financial pledge of some sort; a policy pledge. This is the one that I think is really exciting because we can get governments. The ITU, of course, as a UN agency, has relationships with every government in the world to make some sort of a policy pledge on what they're trying to do or what they will commit to doing publicly to advance connectivity, advocacy, and programmatic. So basically anything you want to pledge, we can turn it into, want to commit or want to make public, we can turn it into a pledge. I'm sharing the 5 pledges that we've sort of already shared publicly to give you an idea of the kinds of things that could qualify as a pledge. Now, these are big, huge numbers. These ones that I'm giving as examples, we don't expect every pledge to be at that. So maybe this is overly intimidating, but just to give examples, Vodafone announced a CapEx investment that I'm sure they already were planning, but they used the platform to announce this commitment, which is to provide additional 4G coverage in sub-Saharan Africa. Microsoft made a pledge to train 10 million people. This is on top of everything they've been doing already or they've announced already. Ghana was super exciting. In the Wednesday web dialogue that we had, the minister from ICT was on the call, and she committed these 2 pledges, one related to a universal service fund commitment that will be used to build cell tower sites, and a second pledge tied to spectrum. Again, no doubt these are already plans the government had, but we are asking people to make these public so they can be tracked and they can be monitored, and we think that's quite exciting. GIZ, our GIZ colleagues, of course, working with us on GovStack together with Kate, our dial, Estonia. They also turned that into a pledge on the support GIZ is providing. And then a couple of weeks ago, Inmarsat made a pledge on donating mobile satellite communications technology and satellite airtime. So that's our link to the website. We made a super simple tool that anyone can go in and enter a pledge. And here's a list of other organizations that we're speaking with. But again, I would just emphasize, for the ITU, we want to get every member state, every government to make a pledge. And that in itself, makes this quite interesting. Just to turn to WTDC, everyone in the DCD network is invited to come. So Maylin, I'll coordinate through you to have an invitation to every DCD member. The Digital Development Roundtable will take place during the World Telecom Development Conference, which is going to be held in Kigali. I think I skipped the slide that showed that. Kigali, Rwanda. But this particular roundtable will be June 7th to 9th, and we want sort of your price of entries and make a pledge. It's otherwise free. We're the UN, everything's free at the UN, more or less. We then want to have the space where people can make these high-level statements on the pledges that they're making. We'll try to make this as dynamic as possible. Obviously, it'd be a great time for networking. And so we're going to have this type of a format where we're going to have these high-level panels where we'll do the pledges, and then we'll have some combination of other types of sessions like a spotlight session and some breakouts. And then again, every organization that makes a pledge, we're going to make sure they are shown to everybody else so there can be some synergies, some partnering. Maybe we can get that paper written that was suggested by Dorothy, but that's the whole idea. Creating this space where you have this neutral space where everyone can come together and make pledges. And so our last, just the last slide is on what's coming up. So we began this development of all the action framework and the pledging back last year. We just finished on March 16th, a big call where we launched the action framework and the pledging tool. And now we're sort of running hard to get until June. So we have hopefully hundreds of pledges. And then you can see that there's a few additional calls coming up. The ones in yellow in particular, if anyone of you are interested to join the working group or join the P2C coalition, send me a note, send Maylin a note, or she can forward it to me. And this is these upcoming dialogues on Focus Area 3, Value Creation on April 20th, Focus Area 4 on May 11th, an all hands working group call on the 17th, and then we all meet in Kigali. So I will stop there with that sort of brief overview of where we are with Partner Connect, but starting to get exciting now with all this, the pledging that's starting to ramp up. So back to you. I'll turn off my screen. Nele, thank you, Nele.
Thank you so much, Alex. I see it's getting big, but I also noticed that there were some hands here, and as we have time a bit left, I think Agora, you wanted to.
Sure. Alex, this is the question I'd raised even earlier on, is where does standards fit in your pillars? I wasn't very evident from your slide.
I mean, standards within, standards are implied. I mean, you need to have standards implied, I suppose, to advance in anything. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer. I mean, we're not pulling, policy and regulation as an example. We didn't call it a pillar because they actually sit across. That's how you actually achieve, progress in the focus area. So same with, that's how I would answer on standards, is that it's part of what actually you need to have that allows you to achieve
yeah,
the overall action.
I would take that answer if you had not put cybersecurity in a vertical, because that also is not a vertical, but cuts across all pillars. So therefore, maybe I go back, and I think I've had this conversation with you earlier on, is
yeah, affordability and cybersecurity. Affordability and cybersecurity are the two that always come up. We sort of made a call. Those two, they obviously are implied to cut across. Correct. We thought in the end, we sort of landed on that, for infrastructure in particular, that we'd call that out as a particular pillar. But anyhow,
so maybe you may want to add standards in that pillar where you have cybersecurity. That's a suggestion. Thank you.
Jane has a question, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, and I just wanted to quickly ask the question. If we have a fund, but yet are not deploying, we've got concessional capital and blended finance streams that we're working on. We're not moving some of that blended finance yet. We will be. The concessional capital we're getting out the door in the form of grants and low interest loans. So is that something where we are in the process of building out the pipelines, but we could pledge something potentially because we are working with the non-traditional operators, the community networks and the municipal networks and public access networks right now in the US and then globally?
Yeah, Jane, I think we want a pledge that is a commitment that is then looking for other partners or sharing what is being planned to absolutely be legitimate. We're actually going to be quite open. We have a very light due diligence process, but we just want to create this energy where people can share. Also, then people will learn about what Connecting Humanity does. I mean, that's also part of it is that when you go on there.
Bravo. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. And probably you have already discussed it with in some of your previous sessions that I may have missed. I have a very practical question. What does it take, for example, to contribute to one of these policy lines that you mentioned? What does one have to account for? A lot of time?
No, I mean we're learning from. I think we're aware of two other big UN efforts on pledging: the Global Refugee Forum that UNHCR has held, and then 2019, and then UN Women did something on equality. And both of how we have watched them is, let's not be too restrictive. Let's let people announce what they are planning to do. So Nele, it could be things, that's why everyone on this call could make a pledge, because you're already doing stuff or you're planning to do something. And so it's creating that where, every bit will help contribute to meaningful connectivity. So we don't want to be, we don't want to go back to them and say that's not good enough or whatever as a pledge. That's why those examples I showed were actually a little unfair, because 100 million here, 200 million there. That's not what you need to do. I mean, every little bit helps, and it's about putting everyone together in a room or creating a community as well. Very similar to the DCD philosophy. So I hope that helps. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are coming to an end of this great session that was my first session to chair. But before we close, I was just wondering whether Mei-Lin has something to add from her side to the conversations that we had today.
I want to say that this is the most exciting session in a long time. And so this is marvelous that you start, Nele, your chairmanship on such a high note. The kind of energy and the exchanges on the chat, really fantastic. So congratulations, Nele, on a great first session. And thank you, everybody, for all the energy and participating.
Thank you. Thank you, Mei-Lin. You are so kind.
You are muted.
Oh, I muted myself at the wrong moment, as always. So thank you everybody, and Mei-Lin for your two kind words. I'm looking very much forward to seeing you all soon. At the same time in April, but it will be 19th of April, and I'm looking forward also to work on the agenda with Mei-Lin and everybody else. So if also anybody has ideas or thoughts, please get in touch with Mei-Lin or myself. My contacts are also all open, and I'm looking forward also to get in touch with many of you. It has been a great network that has been put together. So let's put it into a good use, and if it's also interest of some, as we briefly touched upon the cooperation here between the private sector and what the private sector also thinks of some of these developments that are taking place in governments, also at a regional and also at global level, and how it influences each other. So some of these things will be discussed also during these 3 days that I will be in San Francisco here to meet all the powerful and less powerful tech companies. So maybe some of the takeaways we can bring also to the discussion during our next session. So thank you very much. I won't keep you more, and have a great day, those you who have it ahead and who need to go to bed. Sleep well. So thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.